Hi everyone. I decided to make a video today. Happy October. Um, it's been kind of a crazy month. So much has been going on in the trucking world. And so we've just been trying to keep up with all of it. A lot of it good stuff, but it could very well go back to same old if we don't stay on top of it. I wrote a couple letters that I submitted. Usually, when I write a letter, I put it on our website, but I may not have time to do that um, this week or next week. So I wanted to give kind of an overview, and they're somewhat related to driver. First one was a bill that came out last few weeks. I'm gonna see if I can put it on my screen and give you like a little overview of it somehow or another. Here we go. Here it is. I don't think I'm going to share my screen this time, but I might just read a little bit of it to you. The well, that's the other one. It's this one. Um okay. So I sent this a couple weeks ago in its entire length. And then I attached some recent prime settlements to it also. And the bill first letter is regarding support for the Predatory Truck Leasing Prevention Act, HR 5423. Julia Brownlee of California introduced it, and um, OIDA is supporting it, and so are the Teamsters. Um, Real Women in Trucking submitted contract samples during the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration Truck Leasing Task Force. And we also gave recommendations on who should be on it. Um, in the movie Driver, you see that I was affected by a predatory lease program. It was a third party lease, and I write a little bit about that in this letter. But how the catalyst for all of that, it's not explained in the movie Driver, kind of snowballed, was that my trailer got hijacked in South Florida in 2018 on the 4th of July, early in the morning. So the content of the second letter I wrote is about cargo theft. But let's start with the first letter that I wrote to Congresswoman Brownlee, because I think this is an important bill. Um, I already got a co-sponsor, Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton in DC. And I'm trying to go and find all the direct email addresses I've had from the past, because it's easier to send it that way than trying to get through their website. And I don't have the time or funding right now to send out letters by mail, because I have to address them all. I have some lacking ability to do some of that stuff and pay for postage and do like a mass mail out campaign. But I welcome anybody that would help me do that. Anyone could take this letter, revise it, and send it to their own elected representative. When we did Jason's Law, um, first it started out as a petition drive, and the 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 bill got introduced by Paul Tonko, Hope Rivenberg and her family went and talked to him and explained the situation. If you don't know what Jason's Law is, it's what made truck parking an eligible activity for federal funding when and made states have to do freight plans and then they could apply for the funding. And so a lot of the truck parking projects you see today actually started 5, 6, 7 years ago. And they came about and got funding because of Jason's Law. A lot of drivers don't know that. Anyway, Paul Tonko introduced the bill in the House, and then you have to get a certain amount of co-sponsors to move the bill. And then the Senate also has to introduce a bill, or it can be vice versa, and they have to get so many people to sign on before it can advance to a certain extent. Okay. So introducing the bill is just like the first step in many steps. And sometimes the bills run out of time at the end of the year and they have to be reintroduced. So a lot of them go nowhere. Jason's Law had to be reintroduced a couple times and then it finally passed. And one of the things that happened when it was reintroduced is a lot of the set aside funding got gutted out of it, and then now there's others that are trying to get set aside funding, but they don't want Jason's Law, Jason Rivenberg's murder that was the catalyst for that in the text, but it's already in the law. Anyway, that's a whole other issue. What I'm saying is, this is a really important issue, the truck leasing, predatory leasing, and receiving the prime settlements to attach to them really helps illustrate that. I explained to the congresswoman and the others that have been able to get a hold of that we have seen drivers who have worked super hard to get every payment in there, and then they make the last payment and the company slides some pages in there that have a balloon payment that wasn't there when they signed the contract in the first place. One was Tamara Brock, and she was on the truck leasing task force. And I mean, she was really upset. She worked so hard. She helped promote that company on her YouTube channel, and then they did this to her. And, because she has a big social media following, they negotiated privately with her. That company, I don't even think is around. I think they went out of business, LTI. Brittany Richardson, I'm sure a lot of you know her from social media. RTI withheld her heavy vehicle use tax form, so she was kind of in a bind. They took her off her dedicated route. She wasn't getting miles. They wouldn't take a payment on the truck from her personal account. They would only take it from the load she was on, but she wasn't getting any miles. And she went through a mess with that. And she actually gave us permission to use some of her stuff to submit to the truck leasing task force. In any case, what they found was that these lease purchases, most of them are just complete fraud. And so we were really happy to see that OIDA and the Teamsters are supporting this bill. And I wanted to show some examples to the Congresswoman and show our support too, because we do know that a lot of the starter companies used the new students to do team driving, which is really unsafe. They don't tell them your training is going to require you to do some of the most dangerous work that experienced drivers won't do. And they demand premium pay to do it. And we've figured out a way to make you guys do it because you don't know any better and you're just trying to break into this industry. So we're getting ready to come into winter, and you all are going to start seeing a lot of crashes. And those crashes are going to be those drivers that don't have a lot of experience that are being required to do team driving and run that truck 24 hours a day instead of using good common sense and knowing when the weather conditions are unsafe to operate the truck. There's a lot of employer-driven debt in uh, training fleets with the tuition and with the lease purchase trucks. And a lot of the time, the only way the student can get out of doing the team driving component is to sign on to lease purchase. And a lot of times the trainer is getting a kickback to indoctrinate the student into the idea that this is the way to go when they themselves are not really making enough money. And that's why they became a trainer. And I explained that in the letter that companies like Prime, they, are basically on a truck with a trainer that is a salesperson for 30 days, or whatever amount of time they're with them. Everybody's trying to tell them how great it is to be an owner op. You are not an owner op when you're in lease purchase. You're a misclassified worker. You are a misclassified worker. And so the ATA took DeSova to Washington, D.C., and has been recording these little film, how trucking saved her life as a single mother. But she doesn't clarify that her kids are, her youngest daughter's 37. I was a single mother too. My youngest is around the same age, maybe a couple years older. That means when I entered trucking 15 years ago, they were already old enough to take care of themselves. They weren't little kids that needed to, be driven to school. They could fend for themselves. So the going up to Capitol Hill and telling this sad story is really lobbying for the ATA and for Prime to get Prime more people into these training programs where they can lead them into lease purchase schemes. Now, DeSova turned in her lease purchase truck. I spoke to her on the phone when she was supposed to come give Tamara Brock her Queen of the Road Award in Las Vegas. And she told me it was way too much to pay for a truck. And she was woke and she saw what was going on. Well, now she's an instructor for Prime. So that means she's an employee. And when at the time that she went to Congress and spoke and has been letting them share her pictures all around on Capitol Hill about how California ruined her small business as an owner operator, which is a fabrication because you are not an owner operator, small business owner. You are a misclassified worker at Prime. She was an employee going up there talking on Capitol Hill. So not only is she woke, that means that she is willfully lying and misrepresenting herself for Prime and the ATA. And I made that very clear to the elected representatives who are seeing her picture and her film circulated around. I talked about third-party companies, walk-away leases in the letter. That's what I was in. I talked about how the company that I was associated with was under Celadon Group. And if you've been in trucking for any amount of time, then you remember that Celadon had fraud allegations. They were hiding their losses and inflating the truck values and engaging in deceptive swap transactions. They got sued for like $42 million or something like that. But what they did was they went by all these different names and they had people coming in buying them out, but then they do the same thing over again. So they were Quality Leasing, Element Leasing, Quality Companies, Quality Equipment Leasing, 19th Capital, Hillco Global, 19th Capital Group, H19, So there's all these different names. That the truck I had that's featured in the movie Driver that I was getting calls about, and those calls actually started coming over a year after I turned in the truck. And the reason is because it was a walkaway lease, which means when I went to get the truck, they just, say what company you're going to lease it onto. Oh, this one. Oh, okay, go pick one out. They don't get your social security number. You don't fill out credit application like you do to go buy a car or go through any kind of stuff, like Lone Mountain Truck is completely different. Like they actually want to make sure you got this much money in the bank. They're going to check all kinds of stuff. They're not just going to let you come in there and get a truck and drive out of there. So that so-called walkaway lease that I turned in when this company went bankrupt, which I knew they were I knew what they were doing when I turned in the truck. I knew what they were doing was that they were liquidating their assets without telling anybody. And they were calling drivers and telling them they owed more money than they owed to just shake them down and see what they could get because they knew that the doors were going to close soon. And I knew that. So that's why I wanted to go there in person and say that to him, like I did in the movie. And I knew other drivers that were getting the same calls. And I told them, stand up for yourself. Well, after we all turned in our trucks, about a year later, we start getting these calls from this Hilco Capital saying that we owe like 252,600, some crazy amount. And they said, because you were obligated to lease it for a certain amount of time. So you have to fulfill. I'm like, no, that's not what it was. But they sell these collection lists or when a company goes out of business, it's called a shit list, actually. It's a shit list. It's a list of shit and they sell them and people will buy them for whatever they buy them for, and then they just will call people and harass them to try and see if they could intimidate them to pay something. But I told them, like, you don't even have my social security number. I mean, what are you telling me about? Like, you don't even have any paperwork on me. You have my phone number, that's it. So I explained this also and how these companies, you know they own the financing, they own the collection companies. They change their names, but they're all still doing all the same thing. It is predatory in every single freaking way. So I named some of the big players: Prime, CR England, CRST, Western, PAM, KLLM, and Super Ego. And that's a whole other that's a whole other ballpark right there, which leads into the cargo theft thing. So the letter ended up being, long, not as long as the cargo theft one. But I also explained, the practices of wage skimming. They can do that through not giving you your fuel discount. Um, they can do it through inflating the insurance. They can do it through all kinds of charges for bullshit until you don't get a fucking paycheck or you get a negative one. Um, I touched on foreign influence in our domestic supply chain, which everybody's hearing about right now with the immigrant drivers, but it's deeper than that because some of these companies have gotten into warehousing and 3PL and commercial insurance, and they came to the truck leasing meeting. They were in there listening to what was being said. Our website gets hit from Eastern European countries and Middle Eastern countries all the time. I get an alert. Okay, so I know they're reading all of this stuff. They know. Um, but drivers need to know more and they need to get involved more because as these immigrant drivers go away, the ones that are really poised to take advantage of the situation is Prime and CR England because they used to have like the lockdown on new entrants. And since this explosion of immigrant labor and these Amazon branded trailers and race to the bottom happened, They had the corner on the market of that cheap student labor that they could coerce into doing a lot of stuff that you really shouldn't be doing, and it's not prosperous in the long run. It's sharecropper. You work hard and you end up paying back all the money to the landowner, and you have enough to eat. You can never get ahead as hard as you work. And that's what it is. It's a modern day plantation with trucks. I explained the two contract system, which touches a little bit on the broker transparency thing, where the driver gets a contract, but they never actually see the real actual rate contract. Some are not even allowed to have it. And the most insidious part of all of this is really where the trainer used to be a student who entered this and is not making the money that they thought they were going to make. They don't want to do team driving. They get encouraged to be a lease operator. Then they realize they can't make the payment. So they say, well, you can become a trainer. So now they're in the power position. So the victim has now become the perpetrator, and they have control over the student. So this isn't really entrepreneurship. It's modern day indentured servitude. It is disgusting how they kind of set us up to take advantage of each other. Like, everybody's struggling, especially with these freight rates. And now you're incentivizing people to put them in a fucked up situation that is fucked up because you couldn't even get through it. And it's not right. So finally, I attached some recent settlements that I got from a driver at Prime. I might share my screen because uh, I redacted his information. How do you do that? Share, share, share. Okay. And I'll just go through this. This is 4 weeks. And you can see that the weeks total, year to date total, lease to date. Okay. And this one, I don't know if I have this numbered or not. Yeah, this is settlement one. So the gross paid to the operator so far for the year to date is $29,000. That's below the poverty level, and it is October. So there's only a few more. But look at this, look at these figures here. You can't control miles when the freight is slow. You can't promise people miles when freight's slow. I mean, it's just, and a lot of it has to do if you have a dispatcher that tries to help you out, but a lot of dispatchers are also incentivized to provoke the drivers. So look at the operating expenses here. Look at these figures, year to date total. And you just saw look at all of these things that the driver is paying. This is the second page of a 7-page settlement from Prime. Okay. I'm going to try to get through because I want to talk to you about this other letter. So I got 4. This is the part that has some of the loads, what they're getting paid per load and all of that kind of stuff. All right. And then you get to the final page here, negative $656.60 for 1,136 miles is all they had for that week. This is the next week. Okay. They're at 30. So this is the first one I showed you was the earliest. So we're going, this is the sex. So the last one I show you will be where they were at like a couple weeks ago. Okay. And we're pretty much almost to the end, halfway through the year. All right. So this week, that was the total revenue. All right. All these deductions, you know, let's see. They don't tell you all of this stuff in the beginning. Operating expenses, 3910. Okay. Let's get through to, I redacted as much as I could because I'm trying to protect them, but elected officials need to see these numbers. And this is the truck lease task force asked this. Like, if you think that your lease purchase program's so great, give us your model contract and show examples in paper, not just in words. And they wouldn't do that. So here you go. The driver had 1,924 miles and they got $590.86. Third week for this driver. We had a negative. See that? Total revenue from settlements, 7,271 and 39 cents. Okay. What's their check end up? $345.64. The driver got 2,915 miles for that week. That's less than minimum wage, people. And he ran his ass off. I mean, I know some of you would say 2,900 still isn't very much miles, but look at what he was getting before. He was sitting, he wasn't working. And there are things that I don't know. I don't know if he didn't want to work or there was no miles or whatever. But the bottom line is this in trucking. You can't predict miles in freight. I mean, we've been in a freight slump for so long. It's best to be a company driver when and be reefer, unless you got contract freight. And I know that Prime has contract freight. I know they have a lot of contracts, but all you need to do is piss off one person somewhere. It's very retaliatory. So if you rub somebody the wrong way, they're just going to make your life a living fucking hell. That's just the way it is. Here's the fourth settlement. 3,875 revenue, paycheck 589.14. 1,846 miles. So you can't survive that way. That brings me next to the second letter that I wrote, which is the supply chain cargo theft letter that I posted and submitted. And I will put this on the website maybe somehow or another later, but you can download it from the comment website. So I encourage everyone who's had a trailer stolen to go make a comment. It does not have to be a long ass letter like I've written here. I had a lot to say. Um, but you could just go on and just say a few lines. If you know something, go on there and fucking type something, please. All right. So the docket, what you do is you go to regulations.gov and you search up this number right here, DOT hyphen OST hyphen 2025 hyphen 1326. It's called Protecting America's Supply Chain from Cargo Theft, Request for Information. All right. It doesn't have to be a letter. You could just type in the box and submit it like that. It'll only take a certain amount of characters. And I knew I had a lot to say, so I write it in a letter and then I just say letter attached. And then you can anybody can download the comments of somebody else's letter. So if you want to read this in full, I told them, who I am, who we are, and that we were also part of the Jason's Law movement. And a lot of people at FHWA know very well about Jason's Law, and they know Hope Rivenberg. This lady that this is addressed to used to work at FMCSA, and now she works at Federal Highway in the Multimodal Freight Infrastructure Policy Division. I told them about the driver survey that we did for Jason's Law before the federal government did theirs. And our work is cited in the federal report. Their survey from the government came out with the same results as our driver survey, and we had a lot of respondents. Well, one of the things was the raw data, and I've recently put this raw data up on our website. Crimes Against Truckers raw data from the 2013. It's an Excel spreadsheet that you can download. And those are actually the raw data that came from that survey. But I listed these reasons why crimes against truckers and cargo theft are on the rise, in our opinion. And I'm going to read these 10 right here. The low barrier to entry to obtain a commercial motor vehicle license, the low entry to obtain a motor carrier authority, the low barrier to entry to become a brokerage, the lack of oversight from the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration on items 1 through 3, the lack of enforcement on everything related to the commercial motor vehicle industry, the ease at which bad actors can create fraudulent companies and steal or double broker loans, the lack of truck parking capacity and the rise of paid truck parking at previously free sites, large trucking companies not reimbursing company drivers for paid truck parking, the lack of security and lighting in truck parking areas, including private truck stops, the lack of support overall to ensure the domestic supply chain is protected. And I started out by telling something that I've always wondered about, and that is, why would you have people load a trailer with millions of dollars of merchandise, hundreds of thousands of dollars in merchandise, and then just, and take their picture inside of the trailer with their license to let them know you're the last person that saw this stuff. You're responsible for it. And now leave here and go to the other side of the country, and you better make it there. And you're sitting duck. You're sitting duck for crime every time you stop the truck. We don't do that with first responders. If we send people overseas to go, do peacekeeping duties or war, we don't go, here's your gun and here's all this equipment and go over there. And we don't really care, how you get there, just get there. And when you get there, you can't stay on the base. You got to figure out some other place to go and just be available whenever we want you and be on time. I mean, it's fucking stupid. So I explain how stupid that is because the cargo is getting stolen because you let all these people in fucking the trucking industry that are like, look at this fucking mess. Let's steal this shit. I mean, in a nutshell, that's what's going on. So I didn't say it that way, but cargo theft is like the second oldest profession in the world from ancient times. I mean, this is why they looked for other trade routes, the Silk Road and pirates and shit. And we still haven't fucking figured it out. Um, I talked about the 2010 blog post that I wrote, Serial Killers in Trucking. And that was such a great opportunity to name some of the most dangerous places that truck drivers have to park. A lot of them big chain truck stops. And I told him the story about the guy that was the VP of TA calling me after that post went live to say that the FBI had just called him about my blog post, and he wanted to tell me that they were going to clean up the Ontario TA, because back then, I mean, there would be pimps that were just like standing there, and if you were a woman, they thought you were working the parking lot and you were like competition, and who was your pimp? I mean, it was insane. So he told me they were going to put fencing and lighting and all this stuff. And I've been there since, and it is a lot better, but the trafficking is moved to the motel, and it's not as obvious and in plain sight as it used to be, and on the CB like it used to be. It went more underground. But there's still a lot of these. So this whole list of places that I put in here, and I encourage you all, if you know places in addition to this, you should, make it known. Get on that regulation site, or text me or email me. I'll send it along. I gave some recommendations, and one of them is talk to the truck drivers. Don't talk to trucking associations. They're not truck drivers. They have the company's interests, which is why that old blog post is relevant. The ATA had this guy talk to them who actually worked at the same company as me, and he didn't say shit. And I said that in the article, and I ended up getting called into the HR office for saying that in the blog post, because he got his feelings hurt that I called him out on it. So, I mean, these are the kind of fucking crybabies that we're dealing with. Um, then I took that raw data from the Jason's Law survey, and I collected a collection of actual comments of drivers that talked about having crimes committed against them in places that they parked. And I included all of them. So these pages here are all drivers talking about having a crime against them, having their stuff stolen, being scared, being robbed, and all because of where they were having to park. And this needs to be asked. The drivers need to be asked. So, my other recommendation, we need security and technology and lighting and blue light emergency boxes everywhere drivers park. People say that, there's privacy concerns. Well, if you're on Google or you're on Facebook, I mean, in this world, the digital age, nobody has any privacy anymore. So forget it. In Ohio, they're using facial recognition's closed circuit TV at rest areas to identify trafficking activity. Now, I know that there's some people that have found ways to get around the facial recognition, like painting their face or whatever. But there's a lot of different things that we can do. But right now we have nothing. Okay, we have no security on the highway, and we don't have enough cameras on the truck parking areas. And that's why criminals know. They know whenever we park, we're a target. We can get, our trailer jacked, our tractor jacked. They can break the seal off and steal shit out of the back. I talked about higher foot traffic in urban areas. Those are places people could just walk on there and start stealing shit. I talked about inside jobs, and a lot of times it is an inside job. It is somebody that said, this trailer's going to be here. And I talked about my own experience when I was in CDL school. One of the guys I went to CDL school that I wrote about in my student story, we ended up co-driving together. And first night we went out to dinner, he's asking me if I would be involved in this. Like he was telling me, what if we just parked our trailer and it just disappeared, and we were eating at a Mexican restaurant and he pushed this basket of chips to me and he said, and what if this basket was full of money? And I was like, what are you talking about? And then I realized what he's talking about. Now this guy had already been in prison for trafficking. And that was what he's talking about. Like we just got our CDL, we just tested out, and he's talking to me about being involved in this. And when I reported it, nobody gave a shit. So that's another thing. Why are you bringing in criminals that are been in prison for trafficking and giving them CDLs? Like once they get their paycheck and see they're just worked 100 hours from less than minimum wage, they're going to be like, fuck this. Let's make some real money. And then you're also teaching them the ropes. You're teaching them the ropes on, what that seal means, that there's something very valuable in it. And this trailer's leaving here right now at this time. I should go call my friend. And I think a lot of that happens from the warehouses. So the inside job could be somebody at the warehouse, it could be brokers, it could be somebody at the truck stop, it could be somebody in your neighborhood. Um, I included some information about how the workforce opportunity tax credit is abused by trucking companies. So when they bring in formerly incarcerated people, which is what they're ramping up to do right now, that they're kicking out all the immigrants, they only have to work for them 400 hours till they get the credit, the maximum credit. So if driver turnover is nearly 200% in the training sector, which I cited here, bottom from 2 court cases, you could hire thousands of people and just have them work a few weeks and then starve them out and get the credit. And that's what a lot of companies do. They starve out new students because once you start needing to get paid what you're worth, they don't give a shit about you anymore. But you already have taught them the ropes. You've taught them the ropes of the supply chain, and they don't forget that. So now we have this population of drivers who have entered in the last few years from all different types of backgrounds, and they're learning the ropes of our supply chain. And cargo theft is skyrocketing. Like put two and two together. So I made another recommendation, and that is to put a cap on all these federal funds, tax credits, and incentives that carriers are taking advantage for, and stop giving CDLs to people that are like violent criminals, people who've been in jail for murder, prison for murder. I had to team drive with a guy who was in prison for 25 years for attempted murder, and he was actually the nicest one that I drove with, except that I think he was like drinking or something because he was a freaking moron. Anyway, moving on. I talked about how the trailers are often not cracked. Like there's not enough consistent tracking on the trailer itself. There's tracking on the driver, but the trailer itself doesn't have a foolproof way to track it. And that has to be corrected. I was on some FEMA loads and we had these transponders or some kind of thing that was on the trailer. And when my trailer got taken, I was able to call a number in Washington, D.C., and they were able to tell me the coordinates where the trailer was. So that tracking device was like super accurate. The problem is it could have been removed by a bad actor if they wanted to just chop it off. So it would have to be somewhere that you couldn't see it. So I talked about my experience, learning about cargo theft at school, and my starter company, which was Covenant Transport. And we had an event happen in our Long Beach terminal where um, somebody drove through our gates and beat up our guard and stole a trailer, and the trailer just happened to be full of alcohol. Gee, I mean, like, how did that guy know which trailer of all those white trailers to take that was full of bottles of alcohol? And all of us drivers were like, inside job. That's probably somebody that the guard knew and said for his buddy to come beat him up and take that trailer over there. So you have to have a lot more safety and security in the supply chain if you're going to fix this problem, especially when you're hiring people that you're not really sure. So then I talked about my own trailer being hijacked, which is what I mentioned earlier in this long ass video story. Um, this was kind of the catalyst for my um, truck to be no more. I took this picture a few days before um, that that load. I got a load of Campbell soup down to South Florida to deliver at Miami Publix. I lived in Lake Worth, which is like an hour north. Parked the truck in the same place I'd been parking for over a year. The same place I parked when we went on the cruise for 10 days. Nobody ever touched my truck. Nobody ever bothered it. And there's room to park like 50 trucks there. It's actually like 3 miles from Mar-a-Lago. And so I went home for my 10-hour break. My boyfriend drove me back to the truck. And so these are pictures from the crime scene. The arrow is where my nose was facing that pole, but you can see my tractor's way up there. That's our car. When we pulled up, I walked up there. And this is a front view of it. And then this is the forensics team that they sent, and on the inside they had pulled down this panel to disconnect the ELD. This is when the ELD mandate first started. So they started to unhook it and then they didn't do it all the way. So I think this driver, I knew all right away, this was an old school driver that wasn't quite sure if they were triggering technology that would track them. So they didn't steal the tractor. But what they did was they pulled it out of the way from under my trailer and they ripped out the differential. And that took me down in the shop for like over 16 days plus I didn't have a trailer. And that's how I started getting really behind. Anyway, I explained all that. I explained the process of what happened with the forensics team because they were like, "Oh, we're not going to get anything." I said, "Get a sample of the fifth wheel handle because mine was sticky, and you would really have to put muscle into it if you wanted to um, get it unhooked." And that's exactly where they got a DNA sample from the fifth wheel hitch. Okay. So the DNA sample came back with a match to a guy that had already been in prison for cargo theft. And that's his picture right there. And those are the papers. So they went and they put a decoy trailer out and tried to get him to do it again, but they didn't get him. They went to his house to try to arrest him with a warrant. His family kept saying, "Oh, he's gone. He's not here. Oh, he's in the hospital." Well, then he got picked up for speeding up in Daytona and they found meth in his car. So now he's on federal charges. So he's in there. This article was written about him a year after he's still in jail. And then when COVID happened, lost he was sentenced to like 60 months, so he's probably out now, but this was his job, like this is his business. His record shows that. And I said, after I got hijacked, I was afraid to go home. Every time I parked, I'd get $700 worth of fuel siphoned out of my tanks. I felt like I was being watched, but the questions that always haunted me were, how did he know there was food in my trailer? Because I never haul food. I hate food. It wastes so much fucking time. I always hauled shit like electrical supplies or packaging, like the tubes for DAP, caulking, the caps, a soda can, like shit that, you know, boring shit that you can't unload on the street. So I just couldn't ever figure out why my truck, why that night, how did he know mine of the other three that were there had food in it or something that he could sell? Was there air tag, which was the first time I even knew what an air tag was. I had never heard of them before. Was there an air tag in my trailer that somebody put in there from the Campbell Soup Factory in North Carolina? I don't know. I know if I was an investigator, I would be looking at his lawyer who got him out on his last case and seeing if it's the same lawyer and who his other clients are, because it's probably an organized crime group in South Florida. So, my next recommendation involves, we've got truckers against trafficking training that's mandated. They want us to be the eyes and ears on the road for trafficking, but what about labor trafficking? What about cargo theft? Like, there's nowhere to report anything. We don't have a hotline for sexual assault. We don't have a hotline for cargo theft. We don't have a hotline for anything. They have this National Consumer Complaint Database at FMCSA, and they don't do it. They're looking into it now. They're looking in it now and saying, "Oh shit, this is a real fucking mess." But they need to do something. And thieves know this. They know it's a fucking mess. They're like, it's free game. It's an open season in the United States for cargo theft. So another recommendation I made is there's certain people that shouldn't have a commercial driver's license, and that is violent offenders, sex offenders, traffickers, and cargo thieves. I mean, makes sense. Even the hazmat endorsement has all these exceptions that you can still haul hazardous materials when you have all of these criminal background waivers that you can get. It's ridiculous. So I provided some stats. I talked about a law they have in Nevada which protects people that deal with the public, and that they should have something like that for truck drivers. The Nevada law does not protect truck drivers. It does protect transit operators who are CDL holders, but I do think there should be a national legislation that protects CDL holders while they're performing their job. And for instance, this week, the old guy that got beat up by the Mark Sanchez football player, perfect example, like automatic felony that you even are gonna start getting into it with a truck driver. And here's some of the examples of how that would protect truck drivers. Those who are being hijacked for cargo that they're hauling, truck drivers who are attacked while performing their job during civil unrest, when people start coming up on the highway or on the road and messing with the truck drivers. It would reduce violent altercations that occur between truck drivers over scarce truck parking capacity. And it would ensure immediate consequences to reduce workplace violence between coworkers who are required to cohabitate as a condition of employment in team driving operations. Yeah, same. Law enforcement needs to be trained on all of this. My I was there's seven cargo theft task force in the United States, and in Miami, because it's a hotbed for cargo theft, is one of them. So I actually got a lot of really good investigators on my case, and a prosecutor that was really interested in taking the case, but all of them were kind of like, this is how they get off. And they don't have the resources, they don't have the tools, they don't have the training, they don't have the funding, they don't have the equipment or the facilities or agreements in place to do all the things that they're being asked to do. I haven't even had my coffee and I'm all wound up. So that's another part of the letter. I talk about the consumer complaint database. I talk about that we need this national reporting line, and it should not be influenced by trucking lobby groups, none of them, because they're the reason all this shit is happening in the first place. And then I talked about how cargo theft is effect on the lack of truck parking, because The rise of paid parking is making drivers park places they shouldn't be parking. And the truck stops don't have cameras in the truck parking areas. A lot of people don't realize that because we've called a lot of times about crimes at truck stops and they don't have any cameras back there. That's why it's like a free for all. Now, a lot of drivers know that your companies don't reimburse you for paid truck parking. I got to clean my glasses because I splashed some coffee. Um, so back in the day, there was this thing called idle air before they paid parking was a thing. And idle air was like this thing you pull down in the window that let you turn off the truck so that you could have air conditioning and cable TV and a landline telephone. Well, obviously, in the 80s, that was like breaking, groundbreaking technology, but it became very dated. And so when I first started driving, our company used to tell us if they have idle air where you're parked, you need to park in it and turn off the engine, or we'll take it out of your pay for every hour that you idle the truck based on the price of diesel. But sometimes it was more to park in idle air than it was for the price of diesel, and they would only pay like a portion of it. So it was just like kind of fucked up. Anyway, it became obsolete technology and it went out. But that was a question in that Jason's Law survey to ask them, does your company reimburse you for paid parking? And I know this is probably still probably the same, around the same. Now, since then, we have truck parking club coming and taking free truck parking that used to be free and charging outrageous amount of money, and that's forcing drivers to park places they shouldn't park. So I told, about the lack of safe parking, but also how did this problem get pushed on the federal government in the first place? This isn't the federal government's problem. The problem is the companies don't want to reimburse their workers to park safe, and they don't want to have drop yards and terminals in a lot of lanes because they want to keep their operating costs down. So they shift a lot of costs over to the driver's back. And that's where this problem is going off the rails because now it's the state and the federal government's problem to fix it. And then they get stuck with like, they don't have any maintenance budget to keep cleaning up, you know, shitty toilets. I mean, let's just say what it is. Nobody wants to clean up shitty toilets for a bunch of truck drivers that make a mess in the bathroom. But there's janitorial services that's their business. So I, hire an outside contractor. But the other problem is home time. So, you're working for a company and they issue you 75 feet of equipment, and then it's your problem to find something to do with it when you're home. Now, if you're an owner operator, you can write that off on your taxes. Even the paid parking places in South Florida, trailers were getting stolen. So it was safer for me to park closer to where I would see the truck frequently than have to drive 10 miles past the airport. And at that time, I think Trump was the president then. So he'd park Air Force One right down the road where I'd have to go see my truck. And the traffic would be backed up for fucking hours every time he came to town. So it was not practical for me to park at that place, besides the fact that it was, trailers are getting jacked out of there too. But this is an out of pocket expense for drivers. And these are multi-million dollar companies that are expecting their employee workers who are making less than minimum wage for driving, working over 100 hours a week to park their equipment. So I explained to them, Riggy's Outpost, we realize they are actually land lease operators. They either buy the land or they are leasing it. But Truck Parking Club isn't doing that. They just have an app and they've inserted themselves into this to gouge drivers and kind of shake them down. Drivers do spend a lot of money at the truck stop, $300 to $700 a day between food and diesel and other stuff. If truck stops don't want to provide a service to them anymore, then there should be other players in the market that will. I mean, I know that there's some mom and pops that would really like to, benefit from this. And frankly, there's going to come a time that electrified trucks are going to require spaces to park, even though people say that's not coming. It's coming. It's coming. It's coming. It's happening in the West Coast. There's already places popping up for certain fleets in certain lanes. So the infrastructure is happening, and some fleets are buying into it, especially if they repeat a lane, and they go back and forth. It's not for really for over the road. That's far, far, far away. Anyway, another recommendation, carriers with over 1,000 units and who train student drivers should be required to pay for paid truck parking to reduce driver fatigue, improve highway safety, and reduce incidents of cargo theft. This way, company drivers would be less likely to park in unsafe areas while trying to save money for an expense that belongs to the company. All right. And then finally, I talked about the Trucker Path app, and the Trucker Path app was developed by an Eastern European company that collected a lot of data on us and our movements. And then they sold it to China, and it is operated in Beijing. I know that because I spoke to somebody that worked for Trucker Path, and there's other people in the federal government that know that too. They do have an office in Arizona that they call a headquarters, but it's not really a headquarters. Trucker Path got really popular because a driver started telling everybody to use it and crowdsource information, and it is really a good app. It really works well, and no one else has been able to develop one like it that works as well. However, why are we crowdsourcing everywhere we go, everywhere we stop, and for how long to tell foreign countries that are collecting data on us? Why would we want to tell people in Russia and China our movements and how long we are someplace and where we go to pick shit up and what that shit is? Why would we want to do that for national security and to protect our supply chain? It's not as accurate as it used to be, but it is time that we have our own US based app that is controlled by the United States, not foreign interests. I mean, common sense, people. All right. So, I wrapped it up with the inflexible hours of service and all of that stuff. But getting back to the cyber threats as well, which we saw with the Guy Fieri trailer that got hijacked of the tequila this week, the spoofing of documents and phone that's very sophisticated. People offshore and here who are working with people offshore and organized gangs are very sophisticated to make fake companies and make fake bills and make fake GPS coordinates. And they're really fucking smart. And when we have autonomous trucks, it is going to breed truck hunters that can hack these systems and disable these trucks. So they need to get with the program. If they think that they're going to fix this cargo theft problem, they need to get with the program because it's exploded in the last couple of years that you can draw a line straight to where it originated from. I have no faith in the FMCSA getting this straightened out in the situation that they're in right now because they have a mountain of problems that they need to sort out. However, I have seen a lot of good work come out of Federal Highway, and maybe fresh eyes on this is what it needs to see the sense of urgency. So I sent this, or I posted this letter to the docket this week. I'll stop my screen share. And I don't know if I did that or not. Um, let's see. I don't know. I don't know if I did. Anyway, um, I just wanted to tell you guys this rambling old story here because I think it's really I'm sharing my screen back because I don't know if I'm sharing my desktop, and I don't want to share my desktop because one, it's very messy, and let's see, when there's a bunch of files on there that nobody needs to see. um I hope that you guys put effort into you know, standing up and fighting for your industry. I'm not driving anymore. I'm not gonna drive, and I'm still working on the advocacy work on behalf of drivers, but it's good all of the corrections are happening right now, but we're gonna go right back to where we were in 2007, I think, because when I entered CDL school at that time, there was websites all over the internet. Come see America and drive a big rig because the ATA is a partner in the H2B coalition. So they're responsible for bringing over a lot of people that work for peanuts and people domestically that'll work for peanuts and drive the rates down and be unsafe. And I don't blame the immigrants because they don't know. How are you supposed to know what the right way is if all you've been taught is the wrong way? When you have somebody from your own culture telling you it's okay to drive 16 hours a day, but that's against the law, and you have a language barrier, how are you supposed to know that you're not doing it right? I see trucks tailgating one another like right up their bumper, and I see the call letters on the side. Like, these drivers don't know that they're going to kill somebody, maybe me, maybe you guys, and it's dangerous on the road right now. So there's a lot of work to do, and everybody should help to do it. So thanks for watching this long ass video. I'm going to put it on our website. I'm going to put it on our YouTube channel. I'm going to put it on our TikTok, and I'll give you guys some more updates soon. Thanks for hanging in there with me.